Good morning, everybody, and welcome to class this morning. We're going to be talking about installing and managing end-user technology this morning. But before we get started, I want to take a quick moment and remind all of you that when it comes to registration for spring, I want to talk about registration for spring for just a minute. Spring registration here at Cleveland Community College is open now. You can register for spring now. I want to really encourage you all, I'm going to say it again, to go ahead and get on registration for spring if you haven't yet. Things have changed in terms of how classes are offered and the schedule for classes. So I need you all to try to, as early as possible, as quickly as possible, look at your schedule for the spring, register for classes, get things up and running as soon as you possibly can. It's different than it has been in the past, so I want to encourage you not to wait. Come talk to one of us, come talk to an advisor, come, and get your schedule situated for the spring. It's really important that you have that in mind now, or else you might not be able to get the courses that you need to go ahead and graduate. But today we are talking about installing and managing end-user technology. And we're going to kind of do a little bit differently today. Normally I'm starting these live streams with an end goal in mind. But today I'm going to just kind of put 30 minutes on the clock, which is the usual amount of time that we have for doing these live streams. And I'm just going to cover as many slides as I cover in this 30 minutes of time. This module in particular is kind of all over the place. We talk about networking, we talk about power needs, we talk about ergonomics, we talk about various other things when it comes to installing and managing end-user technology. And all of it has its own level of importance. So I'm basically just putting the time on the clock, and we're going to cover just as many slides as we can cover reasonably within the next 30-ish minutes, instead of, our usual go with an end goal in mind. So we're looking at installing and managing end-user technology today. Now, when we're talking about system installation, that's what's at the core of this module. System installation. And system installation is essentially everything that the knowledge worker, we go back to that idea of the knowledge worker that we talked about in module 1. The knowledge worker needs this system to work, and that system is a combination of hardware and software, various applications in that regard. So when we think about a system, oftentimes we think about, the device, whether it's the desktop or laptop or tablet or whatever that device is, but we don't really think about everything that goes into the need for setting up that device. And so what we have here on our first slide is the overview for system installation. And we have a lot of stuff here that's pre-installation preparation. And this pre-installation preparation is just as important as the installation of the hardware and software itself. So when we look at the pre-installation site preparation here, we see things like location, ergonomics, power requirements, network access, air conditioning, or, climate control would be a better word here, lighting, and fire suppression. In all of these pre-installation site preparation items here, what we're talking about is we're talking about creating an environment that is conducive for work to happen. So before we can put this system in, before this knowledge worker can work on this device, this computer, this desktop, laptop, tablet, whatever you have, we have to consider where we're going to put it and what the ancillary needs are for this device to be able to operate. Then we can start talking about site management documentation. Now that we've established this site, what do we need to know to be able to keep this site up and running? Because, there are ergonomic requirements that we need to maintain. There are power requirements that need to be maintained. There are networking requirements that need to be maintained. Climate control that needs to be maintained. Lighting that needs to be maintained. Fire suppression that needs to be maintained. So we need to have documentation that allows us to understand how we maintain all of these things that we did during the pre-installation process. It's not enough that we just do the pre-installation and just leave it there to rot. We have to understand that these things require monitoring, they require maintenance, and the ability to monitor and maintenance those would go into some kind of site management documentation. And only then, after we have the site fully prepared, with an understanding of how we are going to maintain this site going forward, can we install the hardware, the servers, the desktops, the laptops, the tablets, whatever we've got. Then we can put the operating systems, we can actually hook up and do the networking. Then we can install the required applications and then, make sure that everything is wrapped up. So in a nutshell, that's our system installation overview. But we're going to take a few minutes, with the time that we have allocated for ourselves this morning, and look at some of the different parts of this. Now, when we're looking at pre-installation site preparation, there are constraints. There are things that stand in our way that we have to consider as we're looking at this location, as we're doing this pre-installation work. Remember all these pre-installation things that we have here: location, ergonomics, power requirements, network access, air conditioning, lighting, fire suppression. We have these issues here that can help us stand in our way of getting this pre-installation done. One is space requirements. If you have a lot of servers that you need to install, big servers take up a lot of space. Do you have the square footage required that, is going to be able to accommodate all of your space needs? If you want to set up a data center, for example, you're going to need servers. You're going to need air handlers and climate controllers, crack units, UPS systems, various other devices that are going to fill up a reasonably sized room. So if you don't have a room that can offer the space requirements for all of that material, then you have to reconsider what you can do, or reconsider the room. Special furniture that goes into ergonomics. We'll talk a little bit more about ergonomics, hopefully, when we get there. We have people that are working on computers all day long. So we want to make sure that these people have the furniture that they need, whether it's a footrest, whether it's a special chair, whether it's a special keyboard or mouse, even. A desk. Maybe a standing desk that can allow them to do their job without getting hurt. Because, we don't think about people who work on computers all day long to be in any sort of danger, but these repetitive motion kind of injuries that we see with things like carpal tunnel, back problems from sitting in chairs all day, and then like eye strain problems from looking at blue light monitors all day long. These things can cause issues. So we have to consider ergonomics and special furniture, and then are there do we need storage? What are ADA and OSHA accommodations that we need to make sure that we have? ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. So if we are setting up data center racks, we need to make sure that the data center racks are, I believe it's 33 inches between. Enough to be able to get a wheelchair comfortably between the racks for individuals who, have a disability. These are things that we have to consider. And then OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We have to just consider OSHA requirements as we make these sort of site preparations. Adequate power supplies. Do we have power coming in? Network access, whether it's wired or wireless. Air conditioning. And again, we're saying more than just air conditioning here. We're saying climate control. Lighting problems. And then fire suppression systems. So when coming up with a location to put your technology components, one of the big things that you want to do when you're trying to find a location to put your computer system is you want to devise strategies to conserve space. Space is at a premium. I mean, that's sort of understood. Like, the building is pre-built. Like, if you were going into a project before the building was built, you can build things to accommodate your needs. However, most of the time you're not going into situations where that occurs. You're going into situations where you already have a building built and you're locating technology in pre-existing spaces. So you want to try to devise strategies that take advantage of those pre-existing spaces in the best way possible. So all these system units have some sort of footprint. That footprint is that area that is taken up by that device, whether it's a desktop PC, whether it's a server, whether it's a laptop, whatever you have. You're also thinking about the area that's taken up by the keyboard and mouse, the area that's taken up by the display, the area that's taken up by any sort of peripherals like a printer. And when you're thinking about a peripheral, you want to have convenient access to be able to load paper, to be able to get things out of it, to be able to, clear out paper jams and things of that nature. Any item that you have to interact with, you want to ensure that you have enough space to be able to interact with it comfortably. So these are all things that are important as we're thinking about where we want to put technology. We also want a place to store supplies where they can be conveniently accessed. Tip here says avoid storing paper in a damp area. I mean, that seems like common sense. Like, if you get your paper wet, it's not going to go through the printer as well as it should. If you need to have furniture in a specific area, you have to consider the furniture in terms of the place where it's going to be located, because the footprint of that furniture is going to matter as well. And having an adjustable chair is very important. You want it to be able to accommodate the user, make them comfortable, while still fitting into that area. And then having some kind of protector where it doesn't damage the carpet or damage the floor beneath is nice, because it helps the chair roll around a little easier and helps prevent the floor from getting damaged. So you're in a tight space. You're trying to put a lot of stuff into a tight space. What can you do? One thing that you can do is you can consider smaller form factor cases for your devices. You don't necessarily need a full form factor desktop case for all desktops. You know, if it's not a powerful machine where you have to put a bunch of high-end components into it, you know, you can consider a mini or micro ATX type case, and that would help lower the footprint of that device and save a little space. You could also separate the work table. So instead of having one big work table that takes up, you know, a lot of space, you could have several smaller work tables that you could put in different places where they could accommodate it. Wall mounting things where applicable. And the thing here that we call out is flat panel displays. But we could also wall mount other things, you know, if you have a micro ATX case, for example, that is wall mountable. You know, some of those you can mount on the wall nowadays. Keyboard shelves. You know, you'll find those underneath desks so they don't take up desk space. I have one underneath my desk that I don't use because I don't like it. You know, I don't like placing my hands down there. But, you know, having a keyboard shelf that gets the keyboard out of the way. And then extension cables. To where, you know, you can take peripherals and you can move them around beyond the limitations of the standard cable. You know, it's something to consider as you look at putting these cables where you want to put them, or putting these peripherals where you want to put them, rather. Then there's ergonomic factors. Now, we've talked a little bit about ergonomics in the past, and ergonomics is the study of how to design technology and workspaces to minimize worker health problems and maximize safety, productivity, comfort, and job satisfaction. So some of the things that help ergonomics, you know, we have some hardware peripherals that help ergonomics. You know, if you've seen those Wave keyboards, you know, that have the wave in them, that are arched in the middle, and, you know, they kind of, in order to type on them, you have to rest your hands at an odd angle. You know, these are supposedly ergonomic keyboards, and the fact that you have to rest your hands at those angles, you know, it's a better angle to rest your hands at to diminish repetitive motion injuries to help prevent carpal tunnel. You also have the things like a trackball mouse, and, you know, like working with your hand like that instead of working with your hand as you're accustomed to it on a normal mouse helps to minimize carpal tunnel as well. We also see things like a footrest. And the footrest helps to kind of get your feet at an angle that makes things a little more comfortable for you and helps promote blood flow to your extremities and things of that nature, you know, try to help to keep you healthy. Good chairs with good lumbar support. Standing desks. Keeping your monitor at a good angle to where you're not craning your neck or, you know, twisting your head too much. You know, just having a lot of good ergonomics that help protect the health of the worker. Because, you know, again, you know, we look at these knowledge worker jobs and we see them, you know, we don't consider them to be particularly dangerous, right? But, like, there are a lot of factors here that could severely impact a worker's health. So we have to consider those as we are developing workspaces for people to work in. You know, because we could see things like this, you know, back or neck or muscle pain, leg pain, eye strain, and headaches, you know, from looking at monitors and that blue light. Wrist and finger pain from repetitive strain injuries, as I've mentioned. You know, repetitive strain injuries are the result of continuous use of joints in a limited range of motion. And one of those repetitive strain injuries is carpal tunnel syndrome, which is something that affects the wrists and fingers. essentially your carpal tunnel runs from your wrist into your hand. It can be quite painful to have carpal tunnel syndrome. And, you get it from kind of having your hands hunched like you would in kind of keyboard typing position for extended periods of time a lot. A lot of people that type a lot of people that play the piano a lot will develop carpal tunnel syndrome from having the hands in that sort of position for extended periods of time. But we have these solutions, if your users are experiencing back or neck muscle pain. Maybe we want to replace the office chair with one that's more adjustable. Adjust the keyboard height so they're not hunched over the keyboard. Maybe make it a little taller so they can stand up straight. Or a little lower so, it can accommodate them a little more. Install an adjustable keyboard shelf so that, the user can adjust it themselves to find their own comfort level. Have them take breaks. Perform exercises at their desk, stretches and things that, help reduce that repetitive motion. If they're experiencing leg pain, replace the office chair with something that's a little more ergonomic. Something that provides more lumbar support. Another thing that you can do is place a footrest on the floor. Eye strain and headaches, reorient the displays to reduce glare. You can tilt the monitors. You can change the positioning. Reduce office lighting. So that, if you come by our offices here in the IT department, you'll notice that a lot of us have our office lighting at a minimum. And this is one of the reasons why, because we kind of develop this eye strain. We're looking at monitors all day long. We're doing this and that all day long. So in reducing office lighting, it helps decrease that eye strain, helps to make things a little better for us in that regard. An anti-glare filter on the monitors can help. Glasses. If you need glasses, get glasses. Maybe the user needs glasses. Maybe they need to check their glasses. Replace the display screen for a larger size. And again, taking frequent breaks. And then wrist or finger pain, could be contributed to carpal tunnel syndrome. Adjust the keyboard height. Install an adjustable keyboard shelf. Use a keyboard wrist rest, which you might have seen some of those as well. The padding on the front of the keyboard. And it's not so much that the padding is there. It's not that you need the padding itself to kind of cushion your wrists, but what that padding does is it takes your wrists and it brings them up. So instead of having that hunch in your hands, where your hands are kind of positioned above your wrists, it brings your wrists up and in line with your hands. So that's what you're seeing there. Use a Bluetooth keyboard with a tablet PC so that way you can kind of move the keyboard to where it's really comfortable for you, and again, taking frequent breaks. And here are some workstation ergonomic things that you could do with just a standard workstation. And this is something that you kind of want to remember. I might even take a screenshot of this graphic if I were you. As a help desk person who might be setting up a workstation one day. As you're considering how to set up a workstation, we have monitor viewing angles. We have ideal height of a desk, ideal distance from a desk, a footrest. The use of when the use of a footrest would be ideal. That sort of situation. So you can see, you want your user to be 18 to 24 inches away from the monitor. You want the top of the user's eye to be roughly 15 degrees. If they were to, using the head as the fulcrum. Top of the monitor being 15 degrees, bottom of the monitor being 40 degrees, which would put the middle of the monitor roughly around 25-ish degrees. They are 27 degrees. If your user's feet don't touch the floor in the ideal situation, put a footrest down there so that they can have their feet at an ideal position. Desk should be 26 to 28 inches high. Having an armrest on the chairs. Having a wrist rest for the wrists so that you can bring those wrists in line with the hands. Various other things that you can see there from the graphic. So you might want to take a screenshot of this graphic so you can just kind of put it in your back pocket and use it for later. We do have some devices that can address ergonomic problems. And I'm not really going to cover this. I'm just going to kind of leave this on screen for just a second here while I talk about some other things. And you can kind of read this. As ergonomic problems arise, we want to make sure that we address them. And we can address them in a lot of different ways. Because, really the safety and health of the workers is the most important thing. Right? Because, if people can't, remember that we've said before that one of the most important parts of our job as a help desk employee is to try to ensure that the other people who work for this company can do their job. So if something happens and they are harmed, they have carpal tunnel, they have, eye strain, some kind of problem where they can't do their job, especially when it's something that we could have addressed when we were setting up their workstation, then, it kind of comes back to us and our responsibilities. And, I understand that some of this stuff can be kind of annoying, especially when it's stuff that we're not particularly used to. And, a lot of this stuff is going to be based on the user and what they're most comfortable with. I'm not going to force anybody to use a trackball mouse. But if you're having problems with carpal tunnel, especially in your mouse hand, one of the things that you could do to try to mitigate that is to suggest using a trackball mouse or a touchpad to try to mitigate that. So these aren't necessarily things that you want to force people to do in all situations, but they are things that you can make suggestions toward, and they are things that you can consider as you are setting up workstations. Because of these reasons, potential for physical injuries, even permanent disabilities, and also legal rules and regulations. We're required to keep a safe and healthy workplace. That's what OSHA is all about. And if the employee says, I need this in order to be able to work in a way that keeps me healthy. I need this trackball mouse in order to prevent me from getting carpal tunnel. We have to be able to understand that and provide that. And this is actually an area where if you want to specialize in this, it could be a really valuable place that you could add to your resume. Ergonomics specialists in an organization, there is a need for that. There's a need for a lot of specialties, and this could be a specialty that you could utilize. Power requirements. Let's talk about power requirements for a minute. We're quickly coming up on our 30 minutes. Time does fly. So most small computer systems and networks don't really have special power requirements. Especially in the most modern stuff. Right? For most regular desktops, what we see in terms of need is your standard grounded 110 outlet. right? You might want to do a little bit of power conditioning on that outlet. A surge suppressor, maybe an uninterrupted power supply, so as to prevent, so as to do a little bit of power conditioning and prevent surges, to protect the equipment. But by and large, it's pretty much regular stuff, right? There are some special situations. One is two-prong outlets. In a lot of older buildings that you see kind of grandfathered, you'll see a lot of two-prong outlets. That's before grounding the outlet became standard. So you'd have to kind of be prepared to deal with that. Incorrect outlet wiring, overloading the circuit, shared circuits where if the circuit trips, it could also impact the circuit that the device is on. Power stability and multiple devices. Now, power stability and a lot of that kind of stuff we can handle with power conditioning. We could take a UPS and we can put it on the line, and it can kind of help us with our power stability. And we've reached the end of our time, so I won't get into it too much here. I'll comment about the screen that's on, that's up here, and saying that, the two-pronged outlets, I said that older buildings that have been kind of grandfathered in have the two-prong outlets before grounding was required in code. What we have to do in those situations is we need to rewire those outlets. There are cheater plugs that are available that kind of convert a two-prong outlet into a three-prong outlet. And we can do kind of some grounding with the cheater plug, but it's not going to be the same as it would be if we actually rewired the outlet. Now, that's going to be expensive. So you have to consider that expense as you're approaching the project. So really, when we're looking at stuff like this, and we're going back to, we covered a lot of stuff today, we're going back to all this pre-installation site preparation. One of the things that we have to consider as we're considering all of this is cost. Because all of this stuff costs money. Budgetary needs are important here. Like, you pick a location, and that's why you have to kind of accommodate that location. Because if you tried, because you can't build around everything because it costs too much. Ergonomics is a give and take because all this ergonomic equipment costs a lot of money. But you also have to kind of get the ergonomic stuff, because if you don't, lawsuits and things of that nature cost even more money. Having to accommodate for special power requirements can cost a lot of money, especially things like rewiring two-prong outlets into grounded three-prong outlets. Running network drops and making sure you have network access into where you need to have it can cost money. Making sure that you have good air conditioning systems can cost money. Working with lighting and fire suppression systems can cost money. Spending time to create management documents or even hiring someone to write SOPs, standard operating procedures, can cost money. All of this stuff costs money. So it's not enough to just say, well, yes, we have to do this. Because, yes, we do have to do this. But we also have to consider the budgetary restrictions and the budgetary needs of all of this stuff that it puts on us. So that's 30 minutes. I'm going to stop here. If you have any questions in the chat, I'm going to turn the music back on for a minute and hang out for just a minute. Thank you for watching. Thank you for coming. And we shall see you next time.